And thanks all of you for joining this afternoon or this morning, depending on which time zone you're calling in from. Today we've got a good session on the media and messaging part of our work, and what we're going to do here is give you some insight into how you can participate in the communications process in ways that both reinforce your own goals as a business leader and also strengthen our ability as a movement to have more impact on policy. So to begin with, let me just go through a little bit of background on ASBC for the benefit of those who are new to the organization. And Ryan, if you could pop into the first slide here. And then I'll give a little background on me and Bob, and then we'll proceed into the meat of this. American Sustainable Business Council is an organization that's about 9 years old at this point and has been working on sustainability policy from a business vantage point. At this point, we represent directly and indirectly more than 250,000 businesses across the country. There are 130 direct member businesses, and then there are 80 business associations like sustainability groups and other trade associations that in turn have their own membership. So that's where we get the total of population of businesses that we advocate for and mobilize. We work on a wide range of sustainability issues, climate, water, workplace, taxes, chemicals, and so forth at both the federal and state levels. Then kind of double clicking on that into the kind of things we're going to be talking about today, we're very active through the media as well as working directly to lobby and influence Congress and the administration. We put out op-eds and policy statements. We work our way into media coverage. We present people like you as business leaders to be spokespeople to the media, and that's what most of today's discussion is going to be about. And we bring business leaders like you to Washington and the state houses to give testimony and lobby and influence in other ways on a face-to-face basis. Next slide. Thanks. So I head up the media and communications part of our operation and also the finance part of our operation. I'm one of the co-founders of ASBC back from the beginning. I'm not going to belabor this. My background is both private sector and policy advocacy on the private sector, mostly in the media and technology worlds. And I also have a writing role. I do a regular column in U.S. News and World Report in their economic intelligence section. Next slide. Bob Keener is part of the communications organization. He is the director of PR for ASBC, and he comes from a background that spans both the public and private sector as well. And he leads all the media work that we do in terms of connecting you as business leaders with the broader media world. So next slide, please. So here we have Arnold Schwarzenegger early in his career, showing what it means to be well prepared and strong and flex your muscles for maximum effect. And in a sense, that's what we want to do here. Our goals today are really twofold. We want to help you understand the power and influence that you can have as a media spokesperson in accomplishing your goals and changing policy. And we want to give you a bit of training to help you maximize your impact and step into the kind of leadership roles that we think are natural for you. In a sense, there's a kind of synergistic relationship between ASBC and its members. We're here to help you accomplish the policy goals that you feel strongly about. And at the same time, we need your engagement to accomplish these goals. It's really the principle that we can get things done together that individually we cannot accomplish. So part of that is to brief you on just how it is that business leaders are so influential in the policy process as a spokesperson and an advocate for policy change. And then another part of that is to give you a bit of training on how to step into this role and use your influence for maximum effect. Next slide. Let me begin by talking about why business leaders are as important to this as you are. And there's a tremendous credibility that you bring as a business leader, whether you're an executive or a manager or an owner. America has a love affair with business, small business in particular, and businesses with a Main Street cast are used as a symbol by both political parties for much of what is good in America. And likewise, the idea of entrepreneurship is respected and admired across the political spectrum and influential with both parties. So what this means is that as a business leader, you can walk into a Democratic office and you can walk into a Republican office and get a respectful audience. This is not true for just about any other role in our society. Progressive advocacy groups can walk into a senator from a blue state and get a good hearing and be laughed out of the senator's office from a red state. But you're welcome in both places. And so the credibility and the ability to work across the aisle is particularly important in a political time like today, when there are way more Republicans than we're counting in office than Democrats. And we have to be able to communicate and be taken seriously by both sides. Another piece of this is that business people and business messages are particularly credible when it comes to countering right-wing arguments against taxes and regulation. So, for example, the idea that any tax is a job killer, any regulation is a job killer, government should be shrunk because government always messes things up when it's allowed to intervene, all those kinds of things. And you have enormous credibility as a business leader in countering those because you can talk firsthand. And that's where we come to personal credibility. A lot of people are scared off from doing this kind of media work because they feel they have to become a policy expert. And they feel that they'll be put out in a situation where if they don't know all the policy detail, they might be asked a question they can't answer and might be embarrassed in front of the microphone or in front of the camera. But really, the situation is that your credibility does not come from mastering the fine points, the details of the policy. Your credibility comes from your personal experience and your pragmatic experience in running a business. Let me give you a couple of examples. Back in 2009, 2010, the Waxman-Markey climate bill was a major fight in the House. And this was the climate legislation that Obama put forward. It barely passed the House, and then it died in the Senate. And it passed the House because there were 19 defections or so, roughly that number, from Republicans. So to give an example of one of them, we had Mary Bono Mack, who was the representative from Palm Springs, California. Now, this area has tremendous solar and wind assets, among the best in the country. And she heard from business people in her district who said, look, we need to be able to move forward and build our business unimpaired by US policies that favor the fossil fuel industry and give it an unfair advantage. So she felt safe and justified in going to Karl Rove and saying, I can't vote with the Republican Party this time. I'm hearing from my constituents, I'm hearing from business people in my district, and I'm going to do something else. So that's an example of how business arguments got the job done at a time and place where nothing else would really do it. Then there's another kind of example, which is based on your personal experience as an executive, regardless of the industry that you're in. If you walk into a legislator's office and you say that you meet payroll twice a month, every month, and you used to pay minimum wage, and now you pay above minimum wage, and you personally attest that you've gained more in loyalty, performance, productivity, and so on than you lost, then you have a powerful message for the legislator. And regardless of their political leanings, you're going to have an interesting conversation and you have a chance to influence. So I really want to emphasize this because it comes up, it's a common concern. It's not necessary to be a policy expert. what's necessary to bring your business experience, your pragmatism, your outlook, and just talk in personal terms about what these issues mean to your business and to your local economy. So those are two examples of how business advocacy is particularly important. And in all of this, really, self-interest is meeting public interest, because you're talking about your own business and your own experience in business. But where that's really taking you is to show the alignment between good public policies that are good for the country and public policies that are good for your business as a standalone thing. So for all those reasons, you have an unusual and particularly powerful and compelling role to play. So next slide, please. So I'm going to turn this over to Bob. And the main message here that Bob's going to cover is the tremendous changes that are going on in the media environment and what that means for how we engage and how we work with you.
Right. So the conventional PR game of pitching business leaders as spokespeople, as interviewees, has actually become a relatively small part of the mix now. And this is due to a lot of the consolidation and downsizing that's happening. Media outlets have downsized their staff while at the same time they're moving to a 24/7 model. Pretty much every print publication also is online, and so they need to have content going up all the time. As a result, their journalists have little time to research and do background work. Instead, they're just often having to write on deadline and file things very, very quickly. So they're working on stories from quote sheets or an email exchange or a quick phone call at the last minute, right on their deadline before, instead of where in the past you might have expected a journalist to take a few days and take time to schedule long interviews and so forth. This no one covers business policy is an interesting thing that I noticed when I first started working with ASBC, is that journalists either cover the issue, like we're going to talk later about climate change, for example, as an example. So they cover climate, they cover climate change, they cover the environment, they cover policy maybe that relates to all that, or they cover business. But very, very few sort of cover the intersection of those two. And so that has an impact on how you do your pitching and how we connect, how we find the right journalists to connect with, and how we work with them. So as a result of all this pressure that journalists are under, we need to have a lot of credibility in the area that we want to get covered in. We have to work with the journalists very quickly. We have to have quick, pithy, colorful comments already prepared, ready to go for the most part. And they want elements that they can just drop into their sort of standard frames. They want quotes that they can drop into their standard frames. They want comments that fit sort of their agenda and the way they're thinking about the story, the way they've imagined the story. There's very little time these days to sort of talk a reporter into taking a different angle on something. So that's just a taste of some of the constraints that we're under these days. And now I'll turn it back to David.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So next slide, please. So in this environment where things are incredibly pressured and it's very hard to get media attention, we look for ways to break through and get your voices heard. And what we're trying to do in each case is accomplish several different objectives. And you never get all of these in one, but they are all part of the mix. And we do this by moving forward prominent brands like the ones that are listed here, all of which are ASBC members, as well as brands that are not yet as well known as these, but still have a good story to tell. So the first thing, of course, we want to do is inject your voice in a way that's going to help win the issue, which almost always means persuading a legislator to vote differently, or an administrative person to make a regulatory decision differently, and so forth. The second objective is to change the frame, change the narrative of how the media are talking about the story. So for example, when there's a conventional and obvious narrative like jobs versus polar bears in the case of climate change, basically, if that narrative prevails, we've lost the fight already, regardless of what comes next. So we're trying to replace that with a different narrative, a narrative about innovative business versus laggards, a narrative about stewardship versus short-sightedness, and so forth, to give the reporter an opportunity to cover the issue in a fresh way, in a new way, and in a way that helps further our interest rather than further the legacy policies. The third objective is to put forward a sound business and economic case for whatever we're talking about, so that we're talking in a way that's not identical with the humanitarian groups, the environmental groups, and other advocacy groups, all of which play an essential role, but really our message needs to be tailored to the fact that we're a business organization, and that's the voice we bring. The next objective is to inject your brand in a way that brings attention to you more than to us. In other words, we have a trade association brand, American Sustainable Business Council, but the journalists and the politicians know that we're not an operating business, and we don't pretend to be. So our credibility is bolstered by putting your brand out there as operating businesses, and that complements the credibility that we can bring as a trade association, representing a multitude of individual voices. And in parallel with that, we are putting our own brand forward, and the result of all that is to convey a powerful and growing movement of sustainable, socially responsible, triple bottom line businesses. Because we want people to see that this is not just a few one-offs. We want people to see that this is a movement that's getting every day bigger and more powerful. More consumers care, more investors care, investment analysts care, and with that kind of sense of momentum, we can change the debate. So next page. So here's the way we work with you. We do a lot of things, different kinds of things, to help you get your voice into the game. So some of that is the direct one-on-one stuff with policymakers, and we covered that in a previous webinar, so we're not going to really talk about fly-ins and district offices here. But in parallel with all of that, we aim to set up one-on-one meetings with journalists. So if you're coming to Washington to participate in a fly-in, or coming to a state house, we're going to look for opportunities to get you face-to-face with journalists who are covering that issue. And then we inject the message in various other ways, by pursuing quotes through quote sheets and releases, by pitching business leaders to be interviewed, by ghostwriting and placing op-eds and columns. We have pieces every month in U.S. News and World Report, in Green Biz, in Triple Pundit, in Conscious Company magazine, and other places, and many of those go over the byline of a business owner or business leader, and some often in conjunction, where it'd be like one ASBC person and one business leader person as a partnership. We do a lot to placing blogs written by business leaders as guest blogs on our website, and then promoting these. We pitch to talk shows. We pitch people as interview subjects. And then behind all of that, we provide coaching and preparation and support, so that really we can make it as easy as possible for you all to engage with the minimum amount of time, the minimum amount of stress, and to take all the risk out of it, so that you're never put in front of a hostile interviewer or never put forward, inadequately briefed, and so forth. So that's really our job and our commitment to you. Next page. So as we do this, we really want to structure it in a way that helps you accomplish your own business objectives as well as the policy objectives. And there are several benefits that you can take internally to your own bottom line as you're working to advance things that help the social bottom line. So one is to strengthen your own company brand, showing that you walk the talk if you have a brand that's connected with sustainability in some way. And typically our members find that that helps to inspire and motivate employees when they see that CEOs are actually connected and engaged in things that are consistent with the brand image and what the marketing stuff says and all the rest of it. It has a similar kind of effect with your customers, because your customers see that you're out there and engaged, and they respect that. And it strengthens your reputation as a leader in the industry who's helping to shape the overall climate of how business is being done, and the power of business to be a force for good in society, and that inevitably helps to build a company's reputation, increase its valuation, increase the loyalty of customers, and the motivation of staff. So it really is if it's approached properly, and if you leverage it and communicate it internally as well as externally, it's a win for your business as well as a win for the movement as a whole. So what we'd like to do now is transition to a kind of case example, which we'll use as a framework for training, to give you some sense of how you can take things forward on your own in your own state or locale, as well as work in conjunction with ASBC on a larger national campaign. So Bob, over to you.
Right, so next slide, please. And what we had in mind, so we wanted to do something interesting here, rather than sort of a typical media training one-on-one, how to do an interview and all that kind of thing, which we have done in the past and people seem to appreciate. But this time we do something a little different. So we're pulling back the curtain on how you sort of organize and go about actually doing a media push if you were to do this on your own. So what the idea is that if you're going to work with us, this will give you a sense of what's going on behind the scenes so that you have sort of an understanding of the process. But we also want you to feel empowered to take this into your own hands and work at your local level or at the state level to push forward on the policy goals that you have and the passions that you have. So we thought we'd take as an example the state carbon tax. So we have a concrete example that we can use here. And we're going to pretend that we're evangelizing for our state, wherever we are, to put a price on carbon. As we all know, the Trump administration is not going to be addressing climate change in any significant way anytime soon. So the action has very much moved to the states. In fact, ASBC is working to build coalitions in some of the key states right now to build coalitions in those states. We're pushing actual legislation in some states and initiatives that call for a price on carbon. I'm not going to take the time now to sort of argue the merits of the solution of putting a price on carbon as the best way to address climate change, but the reasons we support it are fairly straightforward. It's simple, it's market-based, it's hard to game or undermine, and the best reason probably is that some conservatives like it. So that's why we have actual hopes for it in the future. Now, it's for organizing this part of the webinar, we thought we'd cover 3 general areas: approaching the media, how to work with the media, and then for the writers in the audience, something about op-eds, columns, and blogs. And of course, we want to leave time at the end for your questions. So let's dig in. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So as we think of our goal of calling attention to the pricing of carbon as a solution to climate change, the first step is to understand what journalists are out there to potentially carry that message. Now, you can focus your research on two main types of journalists at the major outlets in your state. And here, Google News is your friend, sorry. Google Friend is something else. So what you're doing is you're looking for stories about climate change or the environment. You're looking for policy stories that relate to those. And then you're also, as I mentioned, we've got this dichotomy. So you're also looking for business stories, maybe in the business section of the paper or in different sections might have dedicated news content that relates to business. But in any case, you're looking for business stories that somehow relate to the environment. So for example, you might find stories about energy companies in your state or stories about how climate change is affecting businesses in your state. So when you find the stories, obviously you'll see who wrote them. And sometimes you can also find out who edited them or who else worked on the team. So again, you're going to be finding folks who either cover the issue and the politics around it or folks who cover business. And so for example, at your at the major outlet, say the biggest newspaper in your state, you may find that there are sort of separate groups within the newsroom. One that works on the environment, one that works maybe on science, and then certainly there is generally always a business desk that where you can find folks. So you're looking for these folks so that you can think about contacting them, and the kinds of titles that you're looking for are things like editors and reporters, correspondents, writers. Correspondents, writers, and reporters are pretty much all the same. When you get over into broadcast, you'll be looking at producers. And when you're online, sometimes you'll also find producers online. When you get over into broadcast, you'll also find these folks called bookers. And that is for when you're looking at talk shows. So when you go into broadcast, you'll find that there are news shows that might be appropriate for you to be pitching yourself onto, but also talk shows. And that actually is a really good place to start if you do have talk shows in your area or in your state that you can go after. So then once you you have the folks identified, it's helpful to know that sort of this point about how stories are developed. You'll often find that there are group meetings within each outlet where story ideas get presented and decided on. And if that's how they do it at the outlet you want to pitch, your goal is to make friends with somebody who can present your idea at that meeting. Sometimes decisions are made away from the group meeting, so you'll want to find out about that. And you want to find out whether stories tend to originate with reporters, who are the folks on the ground and actually doing the writing, or with editors who are their bosses. Now, you won't be able to find out any of this by looking at the websites. I just think it's helpful to sort of understand, again, what's happening behind the scenes as you think about pitching. Ultimately, you want to find the person or team that's the best match for your story by studying their work and imagining how covering your story would fit into their existing body of work. Next slide, please. So given all that I just went through, you're going to want to prioritize. So you're going to want to pick one or two outlets to pursue. Now, just like you wouldn't ever have your first sales call ever be with the biggest prospect in the region, you probably want to start with smaller local news outlets before going after the big media in the state. So try your local paper, your local TV station, and then once you've gotten a sense of the process, you'll be more comfortable and more successful going after the big leagues. It's okay to reach out to multiple people at each outlet once you start to make that outreach, once you start to do that outreach. But once you make contact, just like in a sales process, it's usually a good idea to stick with the person that you make contact with until they pass you off to somebody else. So again, if it's a sales process and you go around your main original contact, you could really mess up your relationships. I think I'll make this point later, but part of what we're doing here is building relationships. So let's go to the next slide. And now that you've picked your targets, it's time to pick up the phone. Again, if you think about this as a sales process and your goal is to make friends, you are going to want to start off by introducing yourself and your business and see if they're interested in your perspective on the issue. So your first call would be something like, "Hi, Pam, I'm Bob Keener, and I run a consulting company with 20 employees here in Boston. I've been thinking about President Trump and how he's thinking of leading the Paris Climate Accord. And I know that's in the news right now. I know you sometimes cover environmental issues, so I was wondering if you would be interested in the perspective of a local business person like me." So now, what you see that I've done a bunch of things in that, and we can unpack that in a minute, but basically you're now waiting for their response, and their response will inform what you say next. So, they'll say a range of things like, "Yeah, I'm interested, but now's not a good time," or "I'm not a good person," or things like that. And you'll pursue the goal of trying to find the right person. If they are not the right person, you can make really good friends with these folks by, if they say sure, which is your ideal, eventually you're gonna find somebody who says sure, yeah, I'm interested in that. Ask them if now is a good time, because as you can imagine, journalists are either on deadline or they're not. And if they're on deadline, they're probably waiting for another phone call, maybe their boss wondering where their story is, and so it's really not a good time for them to talk. So you shouldn't just plunge ahead. You can make good friends by asking, when's a good time, and then getting back to them. When you've got that, you're going to want to make a verbal pitch at that point, just an initial sort of pitch, which we'll get to more in a moment. And your goal with that conversation is then to try to get a meeting. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So, as I suggested in the example I just gave, your best bet is to tie your pitch to something in the news, like the Paris Agreement. So, for example, right now, yesterday, today, the president is expected at some point soon to make a decision about whether the U.S. will stay with the Paris Climate Accord. So there's been a lot of news coverage on this, and more is expected. So it's going to make sense to any journalist you talk to right away. You're going to connect immediately with them that you've got something that is current, potentially useful to them. So sometimes what I do is I think about the headline that I'm looking for as I'm starting to think about the pitch. For example, a headline like "Local business owner thinks Trump should stay in the Paris Agreement." So, that to me is the easy part before you make the full pitch. As you're thinking through the full pitch, you need to think through your key messages. You want to start with, for example, why as a business owner do you think it's so important for us to stay in the Paris Accord? As David covered, your strongest, most effective messages have to do with a business case. We usually are communicating these in economic terms. But just a word of caution here: the sort of the easy trap to fall into is to talk about your business as benefiting directly that's not really as strong as expanding it beyond. And we have a strong EPA, and we have the Clean Power Plan in place, and we are really focused as a nation on trying to meet our agreements with the Paris Accord. That's going to be good for your business. Nobody needs you to say that. Everybody understands that. And for you to say it just sort of makes you look a little self-serving. You can build a lot of credibility by opening up to sort of beyond your business and thinking about your whole industry or your region, the other businesses in your community, the whole system that you're a part of. So, for example, as we think about, why is important to stay with the Paris Climate Accord? Is more extreme weather going to be disrupting to your supply chains or the other folks that you do business with? Are you near a coast? Is sea level rise going to be a problem? Is it the general increase in business risks and the cost of insurance that covers those risks that is it a potential problem that you see for your industry, for your region, et cetera? And then, of course, the whole main point of all of this is building up to why you support a carbon tax in your state. And so that should be where you aim all of this as you're building your pitch. So once you've got that figured out, get creative, write some pithy sound bites that you think will catch the reporter's ears. They're going to be listening for things as you give your pitch, things that could be in the final story. So as you say those things, hopefully a light bulb will go off in your head. One trick I use before I make my first phone call is I write up my pitch as an email. And that not only helps me organize my thoughts, but it also means that if they ask for an email, I can send it right away. And if I have to leave a voicemail, then I've got an email that I can tell them I'm going to send them right away. So that's about the building the pitch. Let's go to the next slide. And so now back to the process, back to the pitch process. Remember that once you find the best person at the outlet, you're building a relationship. It may take a while before they agree to actually do a story with you. So offer to be a resource for them on an ongoing basis. Let them know that they can come to you on this issue or other issues, if that makes sense. As part of your relationship building, you're going to want to try to meet them in person if that's possible. If you've got a nice facility, an interesting facility, invite them over. If they're on the business desk, they would probably be really excited about that. Policy folks and issue folks, probably less interested, but try it. It's always great to be able to sort of show off something concrete that can go in their story. And then when you have them at your facility, think about interesting visuals. And you probably already do this for marketing purposes, but for this purpose, it might be a little different. And it depends on your overall pitch, your overall messages. For example, if you said that supply chain disruption is a big problem, is a big concern for you, maybe a photo of your loading dock would make sense as a way to sort of help anchor that story when they finally write the story. Keep in touch. So don't be a stranger to your new friend. When your issue is in the news, get back in touch with them as soon as you can to offer your perspective. I found that sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. You try multiple times and eventually you hit at the right time and everything lines up and they want to do a story with you. If they contact you, it's crucial that you get back right away. Journalists, as you probably know, are on incredible deadlines, And if you cement yourself in their sort of brain as somebody who will respond immediately whenever they need you, that's going to go a long way to being sort of on that speed dial. All right, so let's switch now to talk about writing, and then we'll have time for questions. Let's go to the next slide. So for the writers and introverts and control freaks, there's a lot you can do without going through this elaborate pitching process that I just kind of tried to give a little bit of insight into. And if this piques your interest, one of the really cool things about this is that you get to control the message. So whenever you're working with news media, you know, you can get misquoted. It's possible that they could end up writing a story that's very different from the one that you thought they were writing. So in this case, you don't have to worry about that. You're writing it. So the first step here is to really think about your writing and what you want to say there. Obviously, you want to research, do some background fact gathering to have as material in your piece. And then before you even start writing, look at the outlets where you want to be published and see what they have now. If you think you can write something that's as good as what's there, go for it. I look at the New York Times and I get really nervous. Sometimes I know that I can get to that level, but oftentimes I don't have the time. So that's okay. You know, if you're not that good a writer or you don't want to put in that much time, scale back your expectations until you find the outlet that will fit for you. Every outlet does have requirements and a submission process that they usually they publish it right on the website in the place that's fairly easy to find. If you don't see it on their website, give them a call, because I guarantee you they have a process, they have requirements, so you should find that out, and then you should follow it. One of the problems with this sort of strategy, this tactic, is that if you're submitting an op-ed, for example, to a paper, the paper's policy may be, we'll look at it for 5 days, and then if we haven't gotten back to you, we don't want it. You can take it somewhere else. And so it's a little bit of a black box, and often it's very difficult to find somebody who will give you sort of a sense of feedback and why they didn't want the piece and how you can improve it. But it's worth trying. I always try to see if I can get some feedback, because I'm into continuous improvement. And so if we can find out why it didn't work, what they would have wanted, what they would have liked instead, that's helpful for me for the next time. And you know, don't get hung up on that. If you don't get any answers, you just have to kind of guess at why they didn't want it and move to the next outlet on your list. So let's move to the next slide, and I want to just quickly talk about how ASBC members engage in media work with us. The first step is that as part of our membership process, we ask members to fill out a spokesperson form, which you can find on our website. This will ask you for what issues you're passionate about, what issues you feel qualified to talk about, your level of sophistication in dealing with the media, and that kind of thing. And that helps us understand when we should contact you when we have a need, and how to work with you. So when we do contact you, it's imperative that you get back to us right away. I can't stress this enough. Journalists will move on right away. If they don't have somebody getting back to them, they'll go to the next person on their list until they get somebody, and then we've lost our opportunity. So we do need to move really quickly in most cases. For issues that you want to be a spokesperson about, it would be good to bone up on the key issues for, so the key messages, sorry, for that issue, or those issues. We have published key message for media documents for all of our issues, and we can share those with you. If there's a specific media request, we will, as David sort of alluded to, we will help you understand sort of all of the context, what the reporter is like, what angle they're taking, what the news context is for the story, and then we'll coach you through the process so that you'll feel confident about it. Of course, your best shot at getting into a story, even if you get an interview or we submit a quote for a story on your behalf, your best shot is to have something that's really pithy and soundbitey. So we'll work with you to prepare that. And then that will give you your platform for evangelizing. Let's go to the next slide. And now let's open it up to questions.
All right, I'd just like to remind everyone that you can submit a question either by using the Ask a Question feature, or you can virtually raise your hand and we'll be able to enable your audio so you can ask your question over the phone or over your computer. We've got a few in here. The first one comes from Linda Norris-Walt, and Linda asks, can you give us an example of a standard frame? We spoke about those earlier, the standard frame for a news article.
Well, yeah, go ahead. So, well, I'm not sure. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Right. So usually, to make stories interesting, they emphasize the conflict element. It kind of puts it into a frame of sports. You know, there's one side and there's the other side, and there's a fight, and then there's an outcome. And sometimes they put things into a kind of hero, victim, villain frame where there's a villain in the piece who's coming in to try and do something. So there's a victim who's being afflicted, and then there's a hero who comes in and saves the day. So you know, a typical conflict frame story would be a climate change piece where if it's written from a conservative standpoint, there are good people. They're the good guys who are trying to make sure America has enough energy and create jobs, and they're the bad guys who are too concerned with polar bears and coral reefs and stuff like that. And there's a battle between the two, and somebody's going to win. So when you see that kind of a story, you're basically trying to sort out how is it being portrayed. Do I step into the role that's being offered to me, or do I need to challenge that role and offer a different conflict in the particular case? The hero, victim, villain story is commonly seen in coverage of taxes, where if it's being written from a conservative standpoint, the victim is the taxpayer, the villain is the government, who's basically coming in trying to steal the taxpayer's money, and the hero is the politician from the conservative standpoint, who's going to save the victim from the villain. What that does is it obscures the other aspect of taxes. That taxes are the dues we pay to live in an advanced society, and that they pay for all kinds of things, in which case the villain is the person who's trying to cheat and not pay their fair share. The victim is everybody in society who depends on those taxes to live a decent life with roads and schools and so forth. And the hero is obvious in that narrative. So what I encourage people to do is in a sense, defocus from the details of the story to notice the sort of standard narrative that is being imposed by the way the story is usually written, or which becomes revealed by the kind of questions that the reporter is asking. And then you make a judgment whether if they're framing it in a way that's helpful to your own message, you can stay with the framing. And if they're asking it in a way that's harmful, you can disrupt the framing.
So our next question comes from Thomas Dudley, and Thomas asks, for op-eds, is it inappropriate to send the same piece to multiple outlets? Is it preferred to wait the 5-day period before shopping it around?
Yeah, really good question. I should have mentioned this. So typically, we think of op-eds as exclusives. And most publications, most outlets will assume that it is an exclusive to them. Some will take the step of confirming that it's exclusive when they accept it. But I think it's important to sort of follow that strategy. And what I do is I make sure that when I'm submitting an op-ed, I explicitly say it's exclusive, so that they know that.
Bob, do you want to explain the difference between like the top tier publications where that's really important and the minor publications which can be worked on a syndication model the way American Forum does?
Yeah, well, so American Forum, I think what I'd rather say is that depending on how local the publication is or how small it is, they may not care. And then once, the other thing where you can sort of go, you can do multiple exclusives, it's called in the business, where you, if you've got, say, a trade publication, say you're writing about climate change, and you're putting it in an outdoor publication, so it's an exclusive to the outdoor industry trade publications, and then you could also submit it to a newspaper, a regional newspaper. It's a good idea to let each of them know that you're doing that, but in most cases they won't have any objection to that.
Our next question comes from Mo Mankling, and her question is, what is your advice on how to respond when a reporter asks you a question you're not comfortable with, and what actual words would you use as a deflection?
Right. So so this is a classic media training question, and it's called by various different names. I call it turning. But the first thing is you need to, if you see people on TV who are really good at this, you hardly even notice because they do such a good job of looking like their answer, like they're responding to. I think the right way to think about it is they respond to the question.
It's a pivot.
Yeah. So and then once you've responded to the question, you're then pivoting to one of your key messages. So you have a question that you don't want to answer directly. You say, that's a really good question, or I don't actually know about that. I'm just a business owner, but what I do know is, and then you're off and running. So there are lots of different ways to do it. You have to figure out what's comfortable for you.
Watch Kellyanne Conway if you want some great demonstration.
Yes, not.
Well, you don't have to agree with her to respect her skill at the craft. I mean, she's a master at not answering a question and pivoting to the message point she wants to deliver.
Yeah, but I think my point is that you want to respond. You want to look like you're responding. You want to gain some confidence with the reporter, especially if this is your first foray into media work. You want to build your ability to develop a rapport and to have credibility. And so saying something like, that's a really good question. I'm not sure about that, but here's what I do know. Things like that, will give you much more, I think, credibility than just turning right to your answer.
And it depends on what's the reason that you can't answer. So like for example, a reporter may ask you a question about something that you haven't seen, and you can just simply say that you haven't seen it, you don't know what the answer is. A reporter may be asking you a question that feels like he's trying to pin you into something that you don't want to acknowledge, and then that's a different kind of situation. So it depends on the context and whether you think the report is being friendly or hostile. But in general, you can always go back afterwards and add more information, but it's very hard to take stuff off the table. So if your gut feeling isn't clear, you're not sure how to respond, you can defer. You can say, let me get back to you on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What we coach people to not wing it. Be prepared, or say you'll get back, or say you don't know. It's okay to say you don't know. And yeah, I think that's probably enough on that. Are there any other questions?
Our next question comes from Richard Lawton, and Richard asks, what about co-authoring an op-ed with someone else? For example, the executive director of an environmental group, in order to illustrate the intersection of business and environment, or is it better to just stick with the business case rather than take that route?
Yeah, both can work. It really, I would say it depends on the message that you're trying to get across, and sort of to think about it from that perspective. Sometimes a business-only perspective is the strongest. Again, going back to what David was saying about polar bears versus jobs. If you're trying to talk about, if your main point is business people have business reasons for wanting this issue to move forward, it can sort of take away from that credibility to partner with an environmental organization in this case. So I would look at it carefully. It could work, but I would take it on a case-by-case basis.
Great. We encourage anyone else who is unable to get their questions answered to reach out to us, and we will be happy to get in touch and help answer your additional questions. And now I'll hand it back to David.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found this helpful in terms of understanding the context of our media strategies and having some training that you can use either to do your own independent media work or to join in media campaigns with ASBC. Just want to stress that our commitment to you is to create opportunities for you to use your time mindfully and respectfully, and to make sure that we always give you the kind of briefing and support and backup that you need so that you can engage with the media in a successful and beneficial way. This recording will be posted on our website, so you can look at it more closely. The URL that's at the bottom of each slide, asbcouncil.org webinars, takes you right to the page where this will be posted and where you'll find other webinars that we've done over the past weeks and months. So with that, I will wrap it up, and thank you again for joining.